I used to think routines were safe, predictable. You wake up, make coffee, scroll through half-written texts you'll never send, and convince yourself that's enough. Most mornings blur together. But then there are mornings that quietly split your life into before and after. That one started in a small corner cafe, the kind with chipped wooden tables and a chalkboard menu no one bothers erasing properly. I sat by the window, pretending to read, when she walked in. Claire, my best friend's wife. I'd known her for years, in passing, birthday parties, barbecues, polite hellos at the door. She was always kind, always just a little out of reach. But that morning, watching her balance her phone in one hand and a paper bag in the other, something shifted. She caught my eye before I could look away. "Hey," she said, surprised, like she'd stumbled into a memory instead of a cafe. "Hey," I echoed, voice scratchy from too much silence. She came over, even though there were empty tables. Her scarf slipped from her shoulder, and I noticed how carefully she adjusted it, like small movements mattered more than words. "Didn't know you came here," she said. "Didn't know you did either." She smiled at that, soft but direct, like she was weighing whether to stay. She did. She sat across from me, folding her hands around her coffee cup, even though it was still too hot to touch. We talked about nothing, weather, neighborhood noise, how the barista always spelled her name wrong. But the pauses felt heavier than the words. When she laughed, I found myself staring at the table, tracing the rim of my mug with my thumb. She noticed. "You're quiet today." "I'm always quiet," I said. "You just don't usually see it." That made her tilt her head, studying me longer than I was used to being studied. I flicked my eyes toward her hands, the way her fingers tapped lightly against the ceramic. My chest felt tight, like a secret was pressing from the inside out. She changed the subject before I could say something I'd regret. But even then, even in the safe small talk, I caught myself remembering the way she said my name when we first met years ago, like it surprised her then too. Her coffee went cold. Mine was half finished. We sat anyway, as if dragging out an invisible moment neither of us wanted to end. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, sighed, and tucked it away without answering. "I should go," she murmured, though her body didn't move right away. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." But neither of us stood. Finally, she rose, pulling her scarf back into place. She touched my arm, lightly, just enough to leave warmth behind, and gave me that same soft smile. "See you around?" she asked, like a question she already knew the answer to. "Yeah," I managed. "See you." She walked out, and the cafe suddenly felt too quiet. I stayed behind, folding my napkin into neat squares I'd never need, watching the condensation fade from her untouched glass of water. My phone sat heavy in my pocket, filled with half-drafted messages I'd never sent. But when I finally pulled it out, one new message waited. From her. "Thanks for the company today. Maybe we should talk more. Just us." And I sat there, staring at the words, wondering if the ground had just shifted beneath my feet that I told myself not to answer her message right away. I told myself it was just politeness, just Claire being kind. But the truth is, I stared at that text all afternoon, the way you stare at a door you know you shouldn't open but can't walk away from. By evening, I caved. Sure, anytime. It was vague enough to be safe, though my heart still kicked like I'd said too much. A few days later, I ran into her again, this time in the laundry room of our building. The hum of machines, the faint smell of detergent. I was pulling damp clothes from the dryer when she walked in with a basket, hair tied up, no makeup. She smiled like she'd been expecting me. "Guess this place is yours more than mine," she said. I shrugged. "Depends who claims the last dryer." We laughed quietly, and for a moment it felt absurd. Me and Claire, standing in a fluorescent-lit basement, grinning like kids caught passing notes. When the noise settled, she sat on the edge of the folding table, swinging one foot slightly. "You ever feel like you're supposed to be somewhere else by now?" she asked. The question caught me off guard. I folded a t-shirt slowly, buying time. "Every day," I admitted. Her eyes softened, and she let out a breath. I thought by this age I'd feel settled. But sometimes I just feel stuck. Like I'm waiting for something I can't name. I wanted to ask what she meant. Instead, I said, "I know the feeling." My voice cracked a little, enough to betray me. She studied me then, as if weighing how much I could hold. Her phone buzzed on the table. She flipped it over without looking. The screen went dark. I could feel the weight of everything unsaid between us. The age difference, the fact that she was my best friend's wife, the sheer wrongness of even being there, wanting more of her time. My hand stilled on a pair of jeans. The thought hit me, what if he ever found out? But then she started talking, gently, like pulling a thread. She told me about her first apartment after college, how she used to sit on the fire escape with cheap tea and a notebook, convinced life was about to begin. I pictured her younger, restless, eyes searching the horizon. And then I thought about now, her sitting across from me in a basement, sharing that memory like a secret. Do you still write? I asked. She shook her head. Not really. Don't have the time. Or maybe, I just don't make it anymore. There was a silence after that. Not uncomfortable, but heavy. I wanted to tell her that someone should still be listening, that she still deserved to be heard. But the words felt too close to confession, so I just nodded. When my clothes were folded, I reached for my basket and nearly dropped it. She caught the corner with one hand, steadying it for me. Our fingers brushed, barely, but enough to stop me cold. Careful, she said softly, though her voice lingered longer than the word. I let out a shaky laugh. Thanks. Her smile was small but knowing. She slid off the table, brushing imaginary lint from her jeans. Then she looked at me, eyes steady, as though daring me to recognize what was happening. I didn't move. Neither did she. The hum of machines filled the space. Finally, she reached for her basket. But before leaving, she touched my arm the way she had in the cafe. Just a light press. Nothing anyone else would notice. Except I did. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I would think later, lying awake in the dark. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And then she was gone, leaving the smell of detergent and a weight in my chest I couldn't fold away. The next time wasn't planned. It never was. I was coming up the stairwell when I saw her door open. Claire was crouched in the hallway, fumbling with a bag of groceries, cans rolling in slow circles across the floor. Need a hand? I asked, already bending down. She laughed softly, brushing her hair from her face. I always think I can carry more than I should. We gathered the cans, our hands colliding once, then again. Too quick to mean anything. Too much to ignore. Inside her apartment, I set the bag on the counter. It felt strange, standing in her kitchen without my best friend there. The silence carried a different weight. Tea? She asked. Sure, I said, though my throat was dry. She moved around the space with quiet efficiency, filling the kettle, reaching for mugs. I found myself watching the small curve of her wrist as she poured, the way she stood close, but never too close. When she handed me the cup, our fingers brushed again. Neither of us pulled away immediately. We sat at the table. Steam curled between us. For a while, we didn't speak. Just sipped, eyes shifting from cup to window to each other. Finally, she said, You don't talk much. Not really. Guess I don't have much worth saying. Her brow furrowed, just a little. That's not true. I wanted to ask then, why do you keep inviting me in? But the words stayed in my chest. Instead, I said, people don't usually notice. She looked at me then, steady, as if to say she did. And just like that, the air tightened. My pulse was too loud. Her gaze lingered, dipped toward my mouth, then flicked away quickly. But before anything could tip further, a knock at the door broke it. We both startled. She stood, smoothing her shirt. I stayed frozen. It was a neighbor, asking about a misplaced package. Claire smiled, polite, composed, as if the air hadn't been heavy seconds ago. I sat there, mug cooling in my hands, rehearsing how to look normal. When the door finally closed, she leaned back against it, exhaling. Our eyes met again. This time, no words. I stood, setting my cup down. For a moment, I thought I might close the distance, say something reckless, do something I couldn't take back. Her hand twitched at her side, like she was thinking the same. But she turned away first, fussing with the counter, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. The moment stretched, frayed, then settled into silence. I started. Yeah. She cut in, not looking at me. At the door, I hesitated. She did too. A half step closer, a breath too long. If either of us had leaned in, it would have happened, but neither of us did. So I left, pulse still racing, carrying the weight of everything that almost was. It was late afternoon when I ran into her again, outside the building this time. She was sitting on the low brick wall by the entrance, a bag of groceries at her feet, scrolling her phone without really seeing it. I almost walked past. Almost. But then she looked up. "Hey," she said, a little too quickly, like she'd been waiting. I nodded, adjusted the strap of my backpack. "Hey." There was a pause, then she asked, "Got time for a walk?" I did. Or at least I told myself I did. We ended up at the small park a block over. The sun was dipping low, the light sharp and orange through the trees. We walked side by side along the path, saying almost nothing. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't unbearable either. It was the kind that made you aware of everything you weren't saying. After a while, she sat on a bench, motioning for me to join her. I did, careful to leave just enough space. Not too much, not too little. She clasped her hands in her lap, then unclasped them, fingers twitching as though holding words. "You ever feel like you're living two lives at once?" she asked finally. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She stared out at the grass, kids running in the distance. "Like there's the life everyone sees, the one you're supposed to be grateful for. And then there's the one inside. The one where you keep asking yourself, is this it?" Her voice was quiet, steady, but the edges frayed. I shifted, leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Yeah," I said. "All the time." She glanced at me then, searching my face. Something passed between us, an unspoken recognition. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of leaves rustling, a dog barking somewhere. My heart thudded against my ribs. Finally, I broke. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever stop feeling behind. Like everyone else figured it out, and I missed the part where they explained how." She let out a soft laugh, not mocking, more like release. "You think I have it figured out?" I turned to her. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes shone with something I couldn't name. "You seem like it," I admitted. "Then I'm a better actress than I thought." The words hung heavy. I wanted to reach for her hand. I didn't. Instead, I stared at the ground, tracing patterns in the dirt with my shoe. "Do you ever feel?" I started, then stopped. My throat tightened. She leaned slightly toward me. "Feel what?" I shook my head. "Doesn't matter." But she didn't look away. Her gaze stayed on me, steady, unblinking, waiting me out. And maybe it was the light, or the way she didn't flinch, but I heard myself say, "Like you're close to something you shouldn't want." Her breath caught, just enough for me to notice. The silence after was a live wire, humming between us. Finally, she whispered, "Yeah, I feel that." The world narrowed to that bench, that moment. I could hear her breathing, see the faint tremor in her hands resting in her lap. I wanted to close the space, to end the waiting. Instead, I asked, barely audible, "Then what do we do with that?" She turned toward me fully then, eyes dark, unreadable. Her lips parted, but no sound came. The air tightened, stretched thin. A heartbeat, too. And just when I thought she might lean in, might say the thing we'd both been circling around for weeks, she looked away. Her hand brushed against mine on the bench, almost deliberate, almost not. And she asked the question that would stay with me long after. What happens if we don't stop? The week after the bench felt different. Quieter. I expected to see her in the hallway, or by the mailboxes, or slipping into the cafe where we'd first sat across from each other. But days passed, and Claire didn't appear. I told myself not to notice, not to keep checking. But every time I heard footsteps in the stairwell, I found myself listening too hard. Finally, I caved and sent a message. "Want to grab a coffee?" I stared at the screen, waiting. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Nothing. That silence said more than words. By the 4th day, I tried convincing myself I was overthinking it. People get busy. People retreat. Still, when I passed her apartment door, I slowed, half expecting it to open. It never did. When I finally saw her again, it was by accident, outside the building on a Thursday evening. She was dressed neatly, hair pulled back, makeup subtle but deliberate. Not her usual grocery run look. She froze when she noticed me. "Oh, hi. Hey," I said, forcing casual. "Been a while." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Yeah, I've been tied up. There was a pause, heavy with things unsaid. Then, before I could think of anything else, a car pulled up to the curb. A teenage boy leaned out the passenger window, grinning. Mom, come on. She turned, waved. Then back to me. That's my son. He's visiting for a few days. Something shifted in my chest. Not jealousy, not exactly. More like a reminder that she had a life far bigger, more rooted, than anything we'd been skirting around. I should go, she added. Her voice was polite, distant. Take care, okay? And then she was gone, sliding into the car, laughter echoing as she buckled in. I stood there on the sidewalk, backpack heavy on my shoulder, feeling suddenly foolish. That night, I sat at my desk, phone glowing in the dark. Half a dozen drafts sat unsent. It's fine. Don't worry. I didn't know you had a son. Do you want me to leave you alone? Delete. 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 I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next morning, I avoided the cafe, avoided the laundry room, pretended I had errands just to keep from being near her door. Still, thoughts spiraled. Was she embarrassed? Regretful? Had she told herself we'd let it get too close? And yet, a part of me replayed the bench, the question she asked. What happens if we don't stop? I wanted to believe that still meant something. But now, with her son around, her smile careful, her words measured, it felt like a door gently closed before I'd stepped through. A week passed this way. Then two. One evening, I walked into the cafe anyway, more out of habit than hope. I chose the window seat where she'd once sat across from me. I ordered her drink without thinking, then left it untouched on the table, steam curling upward. The chair across from me stayed empty. When I finally left, I typed one last message. I miss talking to you. My thumb hovered over send. And then I locked the screen, slid the phone into my pocket, and walked home in silence that IT was late when I saw her again. I'd just come back from the corner store, a bag of groceries digging into my palm. The hallway was dim, only one light flickering above. Claire was unlocking her door. She hesitated when she heard me. Turned slowly, keys still in the lock. Hi, she said, voice low. Hey. The silence stretched. I should have walked into my apartment, closed the door, left it at that. But instead, I set my bag down and stayed where I was. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly, like she'd been waiting for me not to run this time. Your son's gone back? I asked. She nodded. Yesterday. A pause. It was good. Hard, but good. I nodded too, though I didn't know what to say. She looked at me for a long moment, then stepped closer. Not much, just enough that I could see the faint circles under her eyes. You've been quiet, she said. So have you. That made her smile, sad, tired, but real. I thought maybe I scared you off, she admitted. I shook my head. Other way around. Her laugh was barely a breath. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed loosely, as if bracing herself. I didn't mean for things to shift the way they did. I swallowed. Neither did I. The hallway buzzed with the hum of an old radiator. We stood there, caught in the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but waited. Finally, she said, it's complicated, you know that. Yeah. My voice cracked. Doesn't make it go away, though. Her eyes softened, but she didn't move closer. You're younger. You've got time to figure out what you want. I don't want to, she stopped, searching for the word, tangle you up in my mess. I let that sit. My chest felt heavy. I wanted to say I didn't care, that I wanted the mess, but the words caught. Instead, I said, maybe I don't want simple. Her gaze flicked to me then, sharp, almost startled. For a moment, the air shifted. I stepped forward, just enough to close the space between us to inches. Not touching, but close enough to feel it. I keep thinking about that question you asked, I said quietly. Her brow furrowed. What happens if we don't stop? I nodded. Her breath wavered, and for the first time, she didn't look away. And what if we ruin everything? I didn't answer right away. My throat felt tight. Finally, I said, maybe we already did. The words landed, soft but sharp. She closed her eyes, pressing her hand against the wall beside her. For a second, I thought she might cry. When she opened them again, there was something steadier there. Not certainty, but honesty. I think about you, she whispered. More than I should. The admission hit like a pulse. I didn't move. Neither did she. We stood there, the hallway flickering, the weight of weeks pressing down. Then, slowly, she reached out. Her hand brushed mine. Light, tentative, not a grab, not possession, just presence. Her fingers lingered, then curled slightly, like a question. I didn't pull away. Neither of us said anything after that. There were no declarations, no promises. Just that small connection, fragile and real, holding more than words could. Finally, she gave me a faint smile. Okay. I exhaled, something loosening in my chest. Okay. And that was all. Time didn't shift all at once. It never does. The weeks after that night in the hallway were quieter, but not in the way that used to ache. There was a steadiness to it now, like both of us had finally stopped holding our breath. We didn't make declarations. No dramatic lines, no promises whispered in the dark. Instead, we found each other in small ways. An extra mug waiting beside the kettle. A knock at the door when the dryer jammed again. A walk to the cafe on a Sunday morning, where she remembered my order before the barista did. I started leaving for work a little earlier, just so I could catch her at 8:47 a.m., stepping out of her apartment with her scarf half-tied and her phone in her hand. Sometimes she'd smile and say, "Good timing." Sometimes she'd just fall in a step beside me. Either way, it became part of the day. One evening, we ended up back on that same park bench, the one where the air had nearly broken open between us weeks before. This time, no words hung unsaid. She leaned back, exhaling, her shoulder brushing mine, and I realized I didn't feel restless anymore. She told me about her son, about the messy divorce, about the way she sometimes woke up at night wondering if she'd wasted too many years waiting for something to change. I told her about the half-finished texts, the sense of being behind, the fear that I'd never quite catch up to anyone else's life. We didn't fix each other, but listening, really listening, was enough. And then there were the ordinary things. Folding laundry together, making tea at midnight when neither of us could sleep, sharing silence without needing to fill it. Once, I caught her writing again, scribbled notes in a cheap notebook, left open on the counter. She tried to cover it when she saw me, but I only smiled. "Keep going," I said. And she did. Life didn't become perfect. We had arguments over nothing, like who forgot to buy milk, or whether the balcony plants needed more sunlight. Some days she was distant, lost in her own worries. Some days I was too. But beneath it all, there was something solid. Something that made the noise of the world a little softer. The cafe became ours again. Not every day, not in any official way, but enough. She'd sit across from me, stirring her black coffee absent-mindedly, while I drank my tea too hot. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. And once, she reached across the table, tapping her finger against my folded napkin. A small gesture, almost nothing, but it felt like a circle closing, back to where it began, only steadier this time. Looking at her, I thought about all the pauses we'd lived through, the silence in the laundry room, the unsent messages, the empty chair. Somehow, every pause had carried us here. I don't know if we'll ever name it. I don't know if we need to. But on mornings when she says, "Good timing," and falls into step beside me, I feel something I didn't before, not behind, not lost. Just here, with her. And that's enough.